This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
.06. Welcome to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL.
Hi there. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chaim with my glasses on my head coming on. There we go. And welcome this last Friday of 5779. We are just about done. The new year starts. You ready for this? In less than 2 days. It starts Sunday night. Sunday night. How about that, folks? And hang on while I get us live. We will just, start live. There we go. All right.
You know, all the calendars say it starts Monday.
Yeah. Well, that's the civilian calendar or the Gregorian calendar. And we all know that that's a much later calendar. Huh. Okay, so this boom mic takes a little bit of getting used to here. We got new mics in the studio. Or different mics. I don't know.
No, they're all the same.
Okay.
You've just never used the boom
I've just
before.
never used this particular boom before.
That's right.
We're going to get that out of the way.
That's our normal co-anchor news person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there we go. And hopefully you folks can see me and I can actually use my hands now. This is really pretty cool. Okay. So as I started to say, it does start at evening. And why does it say evening? Why do Jews start the day at sunset? Well, because Scripture says it was evening, it was morning, day one. And so...
Wait a minute, back up. It was
evening, it was morning, day one.
Yeah, it always is.
Yeah. Right, so the day starts at sunset, which is evening.
I got you. Okay.
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 Right, if it had said it was morning, it was evening, day one, we'd have started with sunrise. Neither one is going to be midnight. Midnight's a much later arbitrary configuration. Right? You have to have clocks that tell time over the night before you can have midnight.
So it was not 5 o'clock somewhere. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, it's somewhere. Got it. Yeah, so, I guess the choice is at the time, since this is before time telling in the way that we do it now, it's before the concept of hour was invented, then, the things that were easy to tell were sunrises and sunsets. And just as the moon determined the month, the moon month, hear that word in there, it was easy to use the new moon as an obvious end of the month. Which is why
lunar calendar.
Right, lunar calendar. And you don't use the full moon because the full moon's kind of funky. Which night is it? Right? Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's really full or just got a sliver off of it. Right? It's a little more confusing. It's really obvious if there's no moon in the sky that you're at the new moon. Right? And even so, the rabbis required 2 witnesses to see the new moon to declare the beginning of the next month. And they would query them, where in the sky was it, what was the shape of it, because they knew what it was going to look like. And they would sit indoors and wait to be told that the new moon was out. So, yeah, it makes all kinds of sense for the time telling to be very organic, because that's what was around. That was what was available. And so, yeah. And so we are now at what is going to be the first day of the 7th month. That's the other part that really kind of intrigues me. Right? We changed the Jewish calendar year, but it's really the 7th month of the year. Yeah.
So I will ask the pregnant pause question. Why do we change the year if it's the 7th month?
That's a really good question, and I think that has more to do with when rabbis tried to calculate back what are the years in scriptures. Okay, because what they did is they sat and they said, okay, we're here, and this was X number of years ago, and that took so many years, and then that took so many years, and Solomon reigned so many years, and David before him so many years, and Saul before him so many years. And they tried to back calculate all the way back to the Garden of Eden. And that's where the 5780 or 5779, today and tomorrow, comes from. But come Sunday night, then we're going to be into 5780.
Well, why then did they not change the year at the end of what would be the 12th Hebrew month?
Well, because it's not a... Rosh Hashanah is considered the birthday of the earth.
So the earth started in the 7th month.
Right, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
I'm asking a serious question here. Does it say that anywhere in Scripture?
It does not say when the world was created according to a calendar. No, it doesn't say that. And those are all absolute guesses. And that's based on, Sarah was X number of years old when she had Isaac, and yada, yada, yada.
So when we created the Hebrew calendar, why not make the first month of the year Rosh Hashanah?
Yeah, well, I agree, but Scripture says the first day of the 7th month. The first month is the month of Aviv, which isn't even on the Jewish calendar. We use Nisan. Right? When we went into Babylon in the exile, we brought back with us, the 10% that came back, brought with them the Babylonian calendar. And the Babylonian names, the only name that's still in Hebrew is Av, of Tisha B'Av fame. That's the only one that...
The rest are Babylonian?
The rest of the names of the months are Babylonian. Right, we brought back a lot of stuff from Babylon. Yeah, it's Aviv is the spring month. It's what we call Nisan now, and you can tell when it is because the Aviv, the barley sprout, is sprouting in the hills around Jerusalem. Okay, so
that's intriguing.
Yeah,
okay,
right?
Yeah,
because they're going to use organic things that they can see. Right? They don't have the internet. They don't have paper and pencil. Right? They don't have a whole lot to deal with. Writing is probably starting somewhere in and around that time because we have what scholars believe today are things like the Song of the Sea that has a really unique layout in the Torah. If you look at a Torah, when we're come to Simchat Torah in our congregation, we unfurl the entire Torah and open it up in the sanctuary, and people can look at it. And there are what I call thumbprints, things that I can spot from a distance, and I know exactly where they are in scriptures. The Song of the Sea is one of those things. Some people say it looks like the waves on a sea, but what scholars think it was that it may have been a stele, a round pillar kind of thing on which the poem was written originally and carried. And so they would have had whatever form of writing that was. And then when Torah gets written, when it gets written down, that stele is copied, but it's copied in a way that makes it obvious that it was something different. And so when we see these really unique pieces of text, the theory is that those are older pieces that get woven into the story. And
that's fascinating how all this history was recorded somehow.
Well, most of it orally.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if you think about it, there's big projects today to record oral histories. It's one of the big things. And Tucson's got a major oral history center at the old Stone Avenue Temple. Adjacent to it, they've got an oral history center where people come in and record oral histories of their families and things like that. And, these are huge because this is how history is made. But we also know that people's memories of those things, until it gets codified, tends to change. Once it gets codified, it tends to stay because then it becomes rhythmic, it becomes a poem, and the lines don't change as easily. And, so there's all kinds of different ways that traditions get built around these things. And it doesn't make them any less true. They're maybe not scientific, but they're definitely true. And, that has to do with what does realty truth really mean. And here's a question that I ask my classes, a lot of my classes, because I teach a lot of philosophy classes, and the world religion class and things like that. Tell me something you know. I'll start a class usually on the first day with that, just to let them know that I'm going to really blow their minds. And somebody will come up with something that they know. And it can be anything. Sky is blue. Okay. How do you know? You going to play with me here?
How do you know?
How do you know?
Well, if you're from L.A., the sky's brown. But
how do you know?
You see it.
How do you know?
How do you know? You sense it?
How do you know?
Oh, boy.
She'd make a good lawyer.
Rabbis usually do.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody gets, at some point, either they start getting circular and saying the same thing over and over again.
Which is what I was doing.
Right, kind of, and that's not uncommon. Or
Here's a fact. Let's try this one.
Let's try this one.
My son was born February 22nd, 2004 at 1:24 p.m.
How do you know?
I was there.
How do you know?
Because I could see it.
How do you know?
Because I have eyes.
How do you know?
How do I know? Because they call them eyes, and I can see things in front of me, and I saw it happen.
That's not knowing. That's accepting what's called.
It could be called anything. If you want to call it, it was the creation of the devil, I might give you that. But, I was still there.
And I would still ask you, how do you know?
Because
how do you know?
I know what my five senses tell me.
How do you know?
How do I know what my five senses tell me?
Yeah. How
'Cause
do you know?
They tell it to me.
How do you know?
Because I'm a human being.
How do you know?
Well, that one you got me on.
See, I can always, you can be more stubborn.
People have
than
called
you
me
can
many things, so you got me on I'm a human being.
And some people are quick and dance as you did, and others go. Right, so there's a couple of different patterns. The other pattern we didn't see modeled was the circular. You didn't really get into circular arguing. I saw it because I know it, and I know it because I saw it. That's circular arguing, and it's a fallacy. In every sense of the word, it's a fallacy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Politicians and advertising use a lot of fallacies, so people get used to hearing and using them, but they're still fallacies. Right? So we really don't know anything. We don't know that the sky is blue or brown or even polluted. Now, having said that, there's two other caveats to go with it. One, we believe what we want to be true. That was sometimes a little hard to swallow, but it bears out. Think about it.
That sort of
we
makes sense,
believe
yeah.
what we want to be true. And two, we have agreed to certain things. So we have agreed that something we have agreed to call the sun does something we've agreed to call rising in a place we've agreed to call east at a time we've agreed to call morning. It's all agreement, and it's a social contract. Language is a social contract.
All right, Stuart.
He's just sitting there.
Should I sue for breach of contract?
If your language doesn't work.
And every language calls it something different.
Every language calls it something different, and no two languages map one to the other.
But I do disagree with you that we agree with things that we want to be true. Because I can agree about things about myself that I don't want to be true.
I hear you. So I'll counter with
That's
this.
the therapist response.
I'll counter with an interesting image for you. If you took all of your troubles and all of your problems and you placed them on a table in front of you and 9 other people, you would grab your own problems and run.
Absolutely.
So our problems are to some degree of our choosing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's circular reasoning, as you say.
This is getting heavy around here.
I didn't have a really bad temper in my younger days because I choose that bad temper. I had it because I had it, and I've worked hard to mollify it a bit. but it's still a part of me, and I wish it weren't.
And if you really, really, really wish it not to be, it will be less and less and less. I'm not saying that
But that won't change what was.
No, you cannot change what was.
So I can believe that is a part of me was. It's not going to change it.
Okay, I'm going to repeat what you just said. I can believe.
Those words are a social contract.
I think thou art hoisted upon thine own petard, sir.
No, you're the one who used the social contract concept. You can't play word games with me. That's a social contract.
Uh-oh.
You're not allowed to. That's breach.
Where does it say that?
Where does it say it's a social contract?
Well, think about language. Okay. English, for example, is really not conducive to Judaism. It's conducive to Christianity. It's not conducive to Islam either. Things don't map one to one. You know? It's kind of funny because I wanted to title a book, I Breathe, Therefore I Am, playing on the I Think, Therefore I Am. And then I thought to myself, well, how am I going to translate that into Hebrew? Because Hebrew doesn't use, it's going to come across very differently. It would be, I breathe, therefore I. Because the verb to be is not used in Hebrew in the present tense.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So if you would say, in English, I am sitting on the chair. If I were to map the Hebrew word to English, it's I sit in chair. Or on chair, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's no I am. Right.
Huh.
You know, I sitting on chair. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, since I teach English, one of the things that is a hobby of mine, and I can't describe it any other way, one of the things that's a hobby of mine is to notice what speech patterns different languages tend to use in English as the native speakers of those languages struggle to learn English. English is very, very difficult to learn because it doesn't follow very simple rules. It's been called a bastard language because it's got so much German and Latin and all kinds of different roots blended in together along with some
and there's so many similar sounding words that mean totally different things too.
Oh, and the spelling is even worse.
Oh yeah, sure.
Spelling is horrible in English. You know, I was dealing with a student today with the word guide. Yeah, very simple word, Guide. Well, pronounce it.
Guide.
Guide, right.
Oh, I got you.
Right.
But how would the Chinese pronounce it?
Well, that's what she tried to do. Guide, you know.
Guide.
Yeah,
okay.
guide.
Well,
you know, they also want to pronounce the D on the end. They don't want it to be silent.
guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Right. But the U is there because if it wasn't there, then the word would be jide, because the I after the G makes it soft. Right. So you've got all these crazy rules, and so we stick in U's like into synagogue, so it's not synagogue. Ever wonder why it's G-U-E?
Or Chinooka.
Well, that's an even worse word because there you're dealing with Hebrew, right, and trying to pattern it into English. And there's, again, not even a one-to-one on letters, right? You know, it's like one time I was giving a interface seminar, and people kept saying, well, how do you spell midrash? And it's like mem, daled, re, shin. It's properly spelled in Hebrew, and it really doesn't matter how you transliterate it. It's a transliteration. Okay, you know, what do we go with? How do we do it? And now I'm really going to blow your mind. The modern today's Torah is actually transliterated into a Babylonian or Syriac alphabet. The original Hebrew is now called Paleo-Hebrew, and it looks a lot more like the Phoenician alphabet. Surprise, surprise. Right.
Okay.
You know, and the Phoenicians are the ones who are credited with writing down alphabets. And that makes a lot of sense because they are at the intersection of the land route for the Silk Road and the Mediterranean. So they're going to be converting from land-based shipments of goods to ship-based and keeping records of that becomes very important, and so they start to write things down.
But say, unlike some of the Christian Protestants, it's all seem to have different Bibles. There's only one Torah.
Yeah, well, it's in Hebrew. Now, there's many translations.
Oh, here we go.
Right, in English or in German, I'm sure there are multiple translations in German. I've actually never thought about that, but I'm sure there are. I can talk to some of my German folks. I can probably look it up. That's an interesting point. Quoting scriptures in German, I can do some of it, but my mother and I very seldom talked about Torah, and so most of my Torah skills are English and Hebrew based, not so much German. And I come to Yiddish.
But Europeans would not read the Torah any differently than...
Not the Hebrew. Well, yes, they do.
Hebrew is Hebrew,
right?
right?
There's dialects within the Hebrew.
Okay, here we go.
There's dialects within the Hebrew and different pronunciations. Hebrew has changed. It's believed that the Yemenite Hebrew is probably the oldest pronunciation that we have today because that community was the most isolated.
Is in Yemen?
As in Yemen. And they do pronounce things slightly differently. For example, the Vav, they make a W sound rather than a V. And, that makes kind of sense because German scholars did a lot in Hebrew. And so the W in German is a V. So the letter that my mother had the most trouble with coming out of Vienna, being a German speaker, she would talk about Hollywood and Wine Street because she got her V's and W's confused.
Yes.
Right? When we visited my aunt who lives in Burbank, it was Hollywood and wine, von Woman, and things like that because she had a lot of trouble with the W sound. So I can understand how the W became V over time. And that makes even more sense when I look at words like David, as it's pronounced now, is with a Vav. And the Arabic is Daoud, right? So it's U instead of W. It's still got a little bit of a W sound in it. And the Hebrew word Dod is uncle or beloved. And David was the beloved, right? David comes from the same root as beloved. So it probably was at one time pronounced Dawid.
So going back to Hanukkah, is there a C in there?
It's Hanukkah.
Yeah, Hanukkah. Yeah.
Right, and English doesn't have a Ch. And that's where the problem is.
Like some, you look at it, it will have an H and then the other
right,
C.
because people say Chanukah, right? When they don't say Christmas.
No.
Right. So, how do you say Hanukkah?
Yeah.
Easiest in English is Hanukkah. It's really Hanukkah. But, and people with mics really love words like right?
That's right.
A little bit of wet mic there. That's what that's called, folks, when you kind of spit on the mic. And in German and Yiddish are very guttural languages, and so there's a lot of guttural sounds. And my ch skills come from my German, which has different ch sounds. Hebrew has two different ch sounds. It's got a chaf and a chet, and they're different. And
I'm thoroughly confused.
Yeah, language is
it's changed even in my lifetime.
Well, yeah, because when you were a baby, people didn't speak Israeli Hebrew as much. Israel made a shift over to Sephardi Hebrew. Sephardi, the Spanish, or the Turkey. A lot of Jews from Turkey speak the Spanish Hebrew, Ladino, Sephardi, and Europe. Well, the Europeans are called vuz because that's how their Yiddish sounds to the Israeli ears, and like they're always saying vuz, 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 vuz. Yeah, so it's a derogatory term, and they have different sounds. And, right now in our congregation, we had a little bit of I wasn't involved in it, but it's a background discussion going on, I'm aware of it, of how to spell Yizkor. Yizkor is Yud, Zayin, Chaf, Kaf, Resh, Yizkor. And
good luck.
Well, usually in English it's spelled Yizkor. Yizkor.
Well, yeah, okay.
Okay.
There you go.
And Stuart wants to spell it with an S because that's how his grandparents spelled it. Okay, because they were using a German spelling. Because in German, an S is a Z. So, that became Yizkor. It's not Yizkor, it's Yizkor. And that's because in German, or Yiddish, the S is a Z sound.
Okay, I can accept that.
Okay, and so that's how that, and they also, split off the T at the end. It's very often at the end of words. Emet in Yiddish is emes because they make the T soft, so it's a S sound.
So what's the purpose of having in the Hebrew alphabet a suf and a tuf if all the sounds now are going to be a tuf?
Because at one time there probably was a T and a Th. What you call an S was probably a TH sound. And the Dalet has a Dagesh too. And yet you don't pronounce it differently. But I believe that at one time it was a D and a J. I think they were very close sounds that have been lost. Because, and my basis for saying that is that Arabic still has those two sounds. They have a D in what we would call a DH, kind of a J sound. In English we fudge it, like you hear it in the word fudge.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's this DG sound, or DH or whatever. Right. So there's different sounds. In English, for example, TH has 3 different sounds. This, those, think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different places for the T in your tongue. And, I'm having to show this to students, right, where you place your tongue to make the different th sounds. And they don't want to stick out their tongue because it's rude. But you can't speak English without showing your tongue, right? There's some words we can't form without the tongue coming out from behind
I don't know if
the
a
teeth.
judge would like me sticking out my tongue.
If you're going to use any words with a TH, you're sticking out your tongue very, very slightly.
And Americans are rude.
Well, don't forget, we get that from the British because we did not give up on the language. We kept English, and we still call it English. The Brits don't call it English. They call it American. But
That's right. Oh, that's true. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and understandably, because, we spell it differently. We pronounce it differently because they take vitamins and we take vitamins. And there's many other words like that.
Sure.
They have schedules instead of schedules.
They have schedules in Canada, too.
Yeah, well, because...
The colony.
Yeah.
Yep.
They queue up.
Yeah, they queue up. They do a lot of different things, right? They go to the loo and we go to the John.
They smoke a fag.
Yeah. So all different words. As I like to point out to people in Britain, it's perfectly reasonable and expected that a boss will knock up his secretary.
What?
Uh-oh. And we have a civil rights lawyer in here. Oh, brother.
Well, because knock up is to knock on the door
Oh, boy.
and get their attention. You
Oh,
knock
no.
up your secretary,
Oh, God.
right?
Okay.
And you ring off the phone.
I know.
You don't hang it up, you ring it off. There's all kinds of things like that. Sneakers are called trainers. You don't wear sneakers, you wear trainers. So there's lots of slang and verbiage that's different between English and English.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't even get into the, is it soda, is it pop, is it a phosphate? Give me that carbonated beverage, please, right?
Yeah.
And we've all, especially when you get into more casual language, then you get localisms that really come into it, and slang, things like that. Phrases of speech, figurative language. And try translating figurative language from one, we can't even do it from English, from American to British English necessarily. And sometimes you'll get a strange look from somebody whose English is not from the same area as yours.
I know Carol went to middle school, I guess, if you will, at the American school in Pakistan. And, most of the instructors at this American school were British.
Oh,
British.
British.
British or
Oh.
Pakistanis,
So she learned a slightly different English.
She did, yeah. Which is fascinating because when she was at the Indiana University lab school, they taught her 4 different Romance languages right off the bat.
Oh, wow.
So, she was exposed to all that.
So, and that's, if there's anything that I can encourage a parent to do, there's 2 things that I would offer a parent from my rabbinic, from my psychology, from my education. 1, make them multilingual. Teach them another language as early as you possibly can. A baby is not too soon. It will change a lot of the ways that they look at everything. It makes you less arrogant.
Well, you figure by 4th grade she was speaking 4 languages.
And that probably helps her see multiple views of things. She's probably more open to different opinions on things than somebody who's monolingual.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so that's one
Guilty
thing.
as charged.
Second thing, and this is a very new phenomena, which is parents, make sure your kids have 3D toys like blocks and bricks. Please. Whether it's American Brick, Legos, or whichever company you deal with, and get them just the bricks to play with and the blocks. Teach them those eye-hand coordination, 3D spacing skills.
Like Legos.
Something. Anything that they have to tactily maneuver to play with. Because what's happening right now is we have a phenomena called screen children, which are, it's a whole lot easier and cheaper to give a kid an iPad and let them play. And they do not develop eye-hand coordination at all.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because everything's on the screen. They can do everything at this kind of level, for those of you
But
who...
it's 2-dimensional.
Right. And there you go. Now you can see it, and I got it in the camera. It was below the camera before, right? But if the kid's doing everything, playing the video games, they're not learning how to manipulate, and they're not developing that eye-hand coordination. And we're probably going to see it in the next generation, of football and baseball players. They're not going to have the same skill set that your son has, because he played with 3D toys.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really subtle thing, but it's cheaper, obviously, just to buy an app for the kid.
Oh, yeah.
Buy a couple of games than it is to have all of those games laying around the house, having to clean them up and put them in the bin.
Step on them.
All those other things that go with kids, right, which I totally sympathize because I've got a 10-month-old puppy at home, and his toys are everywhere.
Yes.
And the 3 o'clock trip to the bathroom is squeak. And it's like, oh, shoot. I didn't really want to step on that and start that game going. But it happens, clearly. My husband did it last night. It makes anonymous trips to the bathroom harder.
That's right, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he was like, I was so grateful the dog didn't get off the bed and play with me. Because he knows better than to sit there and go squeak, squeak, squeak at night. He gets his toy taken away. He's learned that. He's fairly bright that way.
But getting back to the screen children, I mean,
that's a real serious phenomenon.
That's frightening.
That's a very serious, and we're just starting to see it and just starting to document it. Because, tablets have gotten to the place now where, and I see it even in my congregation, right? The kids that come to services, in order to keep them quiet, mom or dad gives them a tablet, and they're sitting there and they're playing, and I'm glad that they're doing that in the temple, although I'm perfectly willing to have physical toys in the back of the room for them to play, because it does help keep them quiet and contained. No argument about that. Okay, so I just have a social worker who just popped up and said on Facebook here, I'm finding this in my practice, they have difficulty eye-hand coordination. Screen children.
Wow.
It's a real phenomena.
Screen
children. I sometimes think that I might take a few clients on at the temple, do it through the temple, and work with people to develop things like eye-hand coordination in kids, teach them how to teach the kids. Because we are seeing some real problems. and I'm not talking there about Jewish. I'm talking about just in general. It's one of the ideas that I'm toying with in the back. How can I use my combination of skills for the greater community, not just for my congregation? And that might be one of the things that I might do. I've got to talk to my board more about it. Got my VP here, my founding president, sitting next to me. But those are one of the things that I've been thinking about. Because I don't want to just do a standard psychology kind of practice. I want to combine the education into it. I want to do something a little different with it. And so we'll see where that goes. That's for the future.
Well, that's fascinating. Well, fascinating and frightening at the same time.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's really scary. We're crippling our kids. Not only are they not going to be tech savvy, because we're raising a generation of kids that are tech dependent, but not tech savvy. Yeah, they know how to move stuff on the screen. They know how to get the bar to not show because it interferes with their streaming, but they don't know how to fix it when it doesn't work. Right? They're not tech savvy. They're tech dependent. And I even see that again in college students. There was a thing with AccuWeather gives you a really localized image of the rain and gives you their best guess of when you're going to have windows in the heavy rain. And I can remember sitting at the door of the campus, and bringing up my app and looking at it and then flipping over and looking at the radio and having, 5 or 6 students go, "How do you do that? What app does that?" Yeah. So,
really?
Yeah. Right. So, and I showed them and taught them how to do it. But that's what I mean about tech dependent. They liked it, they wanted it, but they didn't know how to get it on their phone. So you've got a couple of kids that are good at it and they're helping each other. They're downloading apps for each other and stuff like that. So you've got, there's a great program out that I use for some of my philosophy classes, especially the critical thinking one, called Tell Walter. It was developed by one of our local professors, by the way, not me, but one of the other professors at IRSC.
Okay,
and
cool.
It's a fallacy tester. So you put your writing into it, and it'll tell you, what are the likely fallacies that it perceives. It uses artificial intelligence and fuzzy logic to ask you some questions and try to figure out where you've got fallacies and where you don't in your writing. Very handy tool for students. And it's an app. And half of them can't find it. I had to send them the link to the app.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So it's stuff like that that's really important. Do we have somebody on the line? We do.
So.
We do. We have Kurt on line 1. Thank you for calling in, Kurt.
See if we got
Go
him
ahead.
there.
Kurt, are you there?
Yes, Rabbi. Did you hit the nail on the head?
Oh my gosh.
These kids, these kids' thumbs work faster than a bolt of lightning when it comes to operating a phone or a tablet. But if you're going to teach the kids this three-dimensional thing, hand-eye coordination is a really, really good idea.
Yeah.
Somebody ought to them and take the attitude, what if?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've got too much reliability on technology, and I don't want to be a doomsday or a prepper or a survivalist or anything, but it's not it's not if our technology is going to go down. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen.
Well,
and these younger generations today, they won't know how to add a column of numbers or anything without that technology.
Right. Yeah, it was painful to memorize the simple tables, but I think we still need to do some of that. Absolutely. And yes, eye-hand coordination and just basic skills. What do you do if you're in a hurricane and the power goes out for 3 days? Right? You're going to have to function.
Exactly.
You're going to have to function.
Well, exactly. I mean, I saw a lady when Dorian was coming, when we thought we were going to hit, she had probably 12 gallons of milk in a shopping cart. And I was laughing, and I said, "You're new here." She said, "Well, how did you know?" And I said, "Well, because you've got 12 gallons of milk and you haven't figured out how you're going to keep it cold, because the first thing you're going to lose in the storm is your electricity."
Yeah. So here's
no You know,
Yeah, here's a hint for folks that need milk and things like that for a hurricane. Get the little pre-packs of milk, like Horizon does that. They have the little. You don't need to refrigerate it until you open it, but if you open it and drink it, that way your kids can still have some milk, or you can have some milk,
or powdered milk.
or powdered milk. Yeah, although that's a pain to
Thank
heat
you,
up.
Rabbi.
And,
I just wanted to make that comment about the technology because it scares me, and I'm an old timer, and I've only recently adopted some of this stuff. But I can still fall back on
Yep.
the way I learned. So
Well,
I can still use my multiplication tables.
That's very good. And of course we've got the other side to that, right? We've got older folks who still want to use a flip phone,
Yes.
who don't want to, who don't want to upgrade to a
Right.
smartphone and take advantage of the technology. So we've got it on both ends. Yeah.
Right. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for calling, Kurt. Appreciate that. Talking about eye-hand coordination and the problems in children today. Yes, they're very, very fast at using their thumbs to type. Not so good with 10 fingers on the computer, but they're really good with their thumbs.
Then there's cursive writing.
Which
Right.
isn't even taught, except
know,
as
I
an
know.
That's a
extra.
crime.
It is a crime. You're right.
It is bad because they're not picking up the skills, the mental pathways that are created by learning to write cursively. That's kind of like the 3D thing. Our brains are extremely patternable when we're very, very young. The stuff that we learn very, very young is hard to overcome. Okay, it's not impossible, but it's hard. Kids that have excellent, very rich environments have a definite head start over the kids that don't have that. So what are some things that parents can do? Let me go ahead and become the psychologist. Ask a psychologist.
Welcome to Dr. Laura.
Yeah, well, no, please. Not going there. You can call me Dr. Rabbi.
Dr. Rabbi, that's it.
But some of the things that are really important for kids, have bright colors in their environment, have 3D toys for them to play with even as a child. And it can be, rattles and the colored rings and things like that. Colors, shapes, very rich and important. Model your best behavior around your children. Do not teach them to be angry, frustrated. Do not teach them to smoke. Do not. And I know that that's easy for me to say, right? But when a kid is young and impressionable, they pay a lot of attention to how the adults in their environment conduct themselves. There's a great song from Into the Woods, right? That musical is "Children will listen," right? And children will do what you do. So it's a line in the song, and it's true, right? If you keep saying the same things or certain things, the kids learn it, and it gets played in this tape in the back of their head all the time. And yes, they can fight it, but they're going to have to work at it. It makes it harder for them. Not impossible, but harder. It's the kind of thing, when a kid grows up in an abusive environment, they are much, much, much more likely to become abusers. And then their children are likely to be abusers. And it continues on down the generations. And one of the things that psychologists really work with kids and young adults with is to try to break that chain. Right? When you do that to your kids, and when it happens, it's not because the parent says, "Oh, I'm going to be abusive to my kid." Right? They don't wake up in the morning and say, "I'm going to be abusive to my kid today," or "I'm going to be abusive to others," and let the kids see it. It just happens because they're used to that pattern from their parents. Right? That's how they learn what love is. Right? The baby is born and it looks at its world and it says, "This is love. This is perfection." Because, why would God put me anywhere else but where it's perfect? Because kids have, this really intelligent concept of life. And I'll counter and say God doesn't make junk, but God puts us in junky environments sometimes. And the way I reconcile that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right? How do good things happen or bad things happen to good people? That we all have lessons to learn. We've all got challenges to overcome for whatever reasons, right? And the things that we counter and change that were less than perfect in our parents, right? And all parents damage their children, 100% of them. My parents damaged me, not intentionally, but just
That's
because
a strong word.
it is, but part of that's because kids don't come with instruction manuals.
Well, true.
You know, and so parents learn how to be parents by making mistakes with their kids.
That's true too.
Yeah, right. And those mistakes do damage. And, you know, can a parent repair it? Sometimes you need help. Right? Sometimes you need somebody from the outside to come in and say, you know, do this a little differently. Or try this, try that. Because, you know, there's no guarantee that X is going to do Y with a kid or Y is going to do Z. Because kids are their own separate little bits of wiring and thought. And so, you know, it's a learning process, but, you know, no parent decides to have a kid who's born without a leg, right? Or who's born deaf or any of the other challenges that kids don't earn. Kids don't earn that. It happens. And some of those things can be surgically fixed. Others can't. Some of them take prosthesis. Some of them take special equipment and tools. God doesn't make junk, but God does give us challenges. God gives us things that we can choose to overcome and work with and fix.
Would one of those challenges be two-parent homes?
It could be. You know, just having a two-parent home might be good or bad, depends on the parents.
Well, that's true too.
Okay, you know, if you've got parents that are physically swinging at each other, and it goes both ways, right? I learned that very early. I was a student rabbi, and I went to visit a woman in the hospital, and she had been kind of banged up by her husband, and she was pregnant with her third child. And, you know, and I'm like, oh, you know, I've got to counsel her through this abuse, and da-da-da-da-da. And so we were talking about it a little bit, and then she said to me, yeah, well, he was kind of angry after I broke his arm.
Oh, no.
And I'm like,
You got to be kidding.
okay.
Oh.
You know, and I did, which is always my fault. Tell me more. When I don't know what else to say, tell me more, because I'm not going to try to control that conversation at all. You take control of this conversation. You take it where it needs to go. Right. So here we have a group of parents, you know, and she's pregnant with their third child. And I have learned, you know, from contacts in the community, they now have 5. Right, so they've got 5 little kids who've grown up thinking that it's absolutely normal, because everybody thinks their family is normal until they learn differently, because they know this, right? How do we know things? By looking and making guesses, as we're wonderfully intelligent at 3, 4, and 5 years old, or 2 even. And so these 5 kids have now learned that love is beating the out of your partner. Right? So having a 2-partner home may or may not be good. Right? I'd rather have one loving parent, right, who can model love.
Yes. I get it. Yeah.
Right? Or a grandparent or whatever. You know, there's more than one way to raise a kid and raise a kid well. You know, 2 guys can raise a kid very well. 2 women can raise a kid very well. I've known plenty of gay and lesbian couples that do a great job of raising their kids. And so, yeah, we've got all different scenarios, and every parent damages their kids some way. Different stuff, different kids, and some of it's the kid's logic. You know, a 3-year-old does not know enough to figure out what's going on in their world. They just don't. You know, they go over, they flick the light switch, and lightning comes. Now they're going to be afraid of flicking the switch, right? Because they have committed the fallacy, right? Post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? Therefore, it happened together. Therefore, it was caused by it. That's a fallacy. There's gazillions of fallacies in life, and that's a popular one that kids will do. That's how superstitions get created. I did this and that happened, therefore it caused it. Right? I wore my lucky earrings and my dog won in the dog show.
You're talking to an old left-handed pitcher. I'm very superstitious. Oh.
So, so there's many things going on. So we've got just a few more minutes. If somebody else would like to call with a question for Dr. Rabbi, please give a call at 772-340-1590. And if you're looking for a place for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, please do join us. You can register online at www.eitzchayyim.org. And click on the front page. It says Make Holiday Reservations Here. Click that, fill out the form, and say Make a Reservation. If you'd like to make a donation to the temple, there's a form there to click and make a donation. If you're going to be coming to the break fast for Yom Kippur, which is not this coming week, but the week after, then you can do that there. That's $15 for that. And please join us. We have services our Sunday night starting at 7. We have our cantorial soloist, Sharon Loper from Tucson, joining us. She should be here in a couple hours. And then on Monday morning, services are at 10 a.m. And Yom Kippur's schedule is on the web. But all you need to do is register, come join us. We'd love to have you come be part of our community this year and hear about all the exciting things. We've got lots of exciting things happening in the congregation right now. It's a booming year for us, and we're looking forward to the expo in November. If you'd like to be a vendor for that, please contact the temple. We've got a great deal going. We've got a Match Me sponsor going for that, so tables are half price.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Contact immediately
before that runs out, so you can get your table reserved for it. And that's on November 17th. I believe it's the Sunday right before the weekend leading into Thanksgiving. So
and that'll be at the community center,
that'll be
right?
at the community center on Aroso Boulevard. The doors are open from 10 to 4. And it's more than a home show, more than a craft show, more than anything. It's all kinds of things. That's why we're calling it the Expo. The Treasure Coast Expo, it's our second annual. The first one was a good success, and this one should be greater. And so I will share with what Stuart said at the end of his show. I wish everybody who is Jewish a great new year, a Rosh Hashanah. May you be inscribed for a great year. May it be a wonderful year for you. L'shana tova tikatevu. May you be inscribed for an absolutely great year. Please join us Friday night services at 7:30, Shabbat morning at 10:30. And we move that up a half hour for Rosh Hashanah just because the services are a little bit longer. But some great music, some great prayer, and maybe some questions to help you move forward in life. So this has been Rabbi Shafir Loeb for Ask a Rabbi. It is the very last Ask a Rabbi of 5779. See you next year. See you next Friday.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, and Happy New Year as well. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie. WPSL.com, webcaster to the world, on Alexa and Google Home.